All right, I guess we're getting started. Welcome, I'm Karen Glover, Associate Dean for Content Access and User Services here at the Georgia Tech Library. Thank you so much for joining on the final session of the day. I'm honored to have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Marshall Breeding. Marshall Breeding is an internationally acclaimed speaker and author. He's the creator and editor of Library Technology Guides and the libraries.org online directory of libraries on the web. His monthly column, Systems Librarian, appears in Computers and Libraries. He is the editor for Library Technology Newsletter, published through Library Technology Guides. From 2002 through 2021, he was the editor and contributor for Small Libraries Newsletter, published by the American Library Association, and has authored the annual Library Systems Report, published in American Libraries since 2014, and in Library Journal from 2002 to 2013. He has authored 14 issues of ALA's Library Technology Reports and has written other articles and book chapters. Marshall has edited or authored 8 books, including Cloud Computing for Libraries, published in 2012 by Neil Schumann, now part of ALA TechSource. He regularly teaches workshops and gives presentations at library conferences on a wide range of topics. Mr. Breeding's popular library technology guides can be accessed at librarytechnology.org, and you may want to give yourself some time for that one because it's a vast piece of information that he provides to us. So welcome, and thank you, Mr. Breeding, for agreeing to speak with us today and sharing your expertise. I will pass that along to you.
Okay, so if all the technology is working, I think that it is. I'm delighted to be part of this conference today. I'm joining from the National Autonomous University of Mexico in Mexico City today. So I haven't been able to listen to all of the previous sessions. I worry that I'm talking to a lot of folks that specialize in AI technologies and are doing pretty advanced work. The couple of sessions that of the lightning talks I saw were very impressive. I'll be approaching this from a library systems point of view. You know, that's my area of expertise. I follow the world of kind of big systems that libraries use, library automation systems, discovery systems, authentication systems, and the like. So I've been thinking, with the advent of all of this interest in AI, I've been thinking a lot about, how does AI impact the world of library systems? So I'll take the next little while to try to kind of go through that a bit. The overview, I think, is what was printed in the schedule. Libraries have to face this thing. It is something that we ignore at our peril, as I say, that ChatGPT, it's only been around a year, but it's really kind of transformed the way that a lot of members of society and members of educational institutions, library patrons kind of approach information and technology, how they write, how they generate images. So libraries had clearly better be part of that and understand how it can be incorporated into the systems that we use and how that we can help library users approach, this new world of generative AI in good ways. So let's think about that a little bit. So take a kind of a little bit of background in library systems just to kind of get us started, is that, I've been working with the world of library systems, since the mid 80s, where mainframe computers were the main way of doing computing at all. And it's the way that the first library systems were done. Eventually, they evolved into client server systems, and then more recently involved into cloud computing systems. So each of those shifts took, I want to say, a couple of decades. And so cloud computing provides, a really good basis for artificial intelligence. It's kind of scalable, computational, and storage technology. And it kind of gets us ready for these next changes that are going to happen much more rapidly. It's just incredible to think, in 1 year alone, ChatGPT and other generative AI based services have, transformed the way that we think of technology. So if libraries take, 20 years to kind of make the next change in the way that they deploy and develop systems, we're going to become irrelevant, right? So I just worry that we need to be able to understand, adapt, and create our technologies in ways that will be useful in this new paradigm. I'm kind of don't like that word a lot, but it kind of works in some of these cases that we've had this kind of linear view of kind of business process automation that is instantiated in integrated library systems and library services platforms and so forth. The way that we deliver our services on the web, is getting better, but still I feel like we consistently lag behind the rest of the world in the way that we are able to deliver good library services through the web and through modern interfaces. So now we're in this next phase, the phase that started a year now for the rest of the world and surely needs to start in the library systems world, really as soon as we can wrap ourselves around it. Those who use technology, who's developed these kind of technologies and so forth. So both libraries and library vendors will probably be involved in that process. Just very quickly to kind of look at some of the models of automation that I think provide a little bit of background to help us understand kind of where I'll be leading in the talk. So integrated library systems have been around forever. Actually, since the mid-60s, the concept of integrated library systems, where you have separate modules for cataloging and acquisitions and in circulation and so forth. That concept has been around for a very long time, and it has gone through multiple cycles of technology, mainframe, client server, web-based, and so forth. The way that we deliver information to users likewise has changed. Most of us, many of us have gone through the realm of library catalogs, which were very clumsy tools in their day, but kind of the way that these early integrated library systems made it possible for library users to search, find, and make requests for the content that libraries had. And keep in mind, this happened, the development of the integrated library system, the online catalog, most of that was cast in stone essentially during the days where libraries were mostly involved in print. So it's been really hard to kind of advance the models of automation given its roots in the printed resources. For a while, there were these electronic resource management systems that attempted to help libraries manage electronic resources as e-journals and so forth became such an important part of what especially academic libraries are involved with. As we know now, by now, I would say most large academic libraries are spending between 85 and 90% of their collection budgets on electronic resources, subscriptions, APCs, and so forth. There was this brief period where you thought, well, why don't we have an ILS module for print, an electronic resource module for the electronic resources? That didn't work. I'm getting another slide in a minute that summarizes it. And then for academic libraries, kind of the business process automation world coalesced into what I call library services platform that bring print and electronic and even digital collection type resources together into a single application. And that application tends to be deployed in web native multi-tenant platforms. So you have a single code base that can serve very large numbers of libraries in the way they automate their systems. I give whole lectures on what that's about. I won't go into the details now, but this slide here summarizes kind of the phases that libraries have gone through. So here, this slide summarizes, from the 80s to the present, the different kind of ways that libraries have deployed systems to be able to manage their resources. And this next slide kind of shows how discovery fits into that. There's, thank goodness the online catalog is mostly gone in academic libraries, so very much part of public libraries, where you have a discovery environment that's able to expose article level content, book chapters, book titles, ebooks, and all this kind of material in a reasonably good way based on a central discovery index that can be extended through local content. So this is kind of the sketch that I've made that illustrates that. This illustrates it in a different way, and we'll come back to this slide a little bit later, a different version of it, when we think about what AI has to do with discovery. So again, you have scholarly communications content, peer-reviewed content, institutional repositories, and all of that, in a discovery index that then uses relevance algorithms plus other enhancements to be able to allow a library user to search for the title of an article, the subject, the terminology that might be within the article, and so forth, and get results. The challenge is that they be the right results and be in the right order, be usable, and all of that. That's where I think there continues to be a lot of room for growth in the library provided index-based discovery services. So finally brings us to the topic at hand, is how can libraries use AI and related technologies to kind of optimize all of that? How do we break out of the limitations of the traditional library automation and discovery models in order to deliver kind of better services to users, better results when they're looking for information, and so forth? Again, I worry I'm talking to an audience that probably has a lot of AI specialists. So, you probably know these technologies better than me. And I'm just trying to summarize them a bit and think about how they have to do with library systems. So the large language models are kind of the heart at what people are thinking about as, Chat GPT, is a subset of deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and so forth. I have some slides coming right up that I think illustrate it a little bit better to help us think about kind of the ways that they don't work well for library content and ways that maybe they could work better for library services. So, building a large language model is not an easy task. It was interesting to hear one of the last lightning talks about how a library has built a large language model with a finite amount of content in order to be able to provide a very interesting and useful library service. Large language models exist in this kind of large big tech arena where you have a lot of the major tech players that are devoting and investing in enormous resources to be able to deliver kind of globally scaled language models based on incredibly large data sets. As well as me, the different large language models that are out there. Chat GPT tends to get the headlines, but others are out there as well. It's also especially important to pay attention to the Llama model coming out of Meta, which is an open source language model that kind of makes these technologies more accessible to those that aren't necessarily big tech organizations themselves. So, obviously Google, Microsoft, Meta, and so forth are some of the big players in the developing of the foundation models that a lot of us are thinking about. This, I like to kind of come up with graphics that kind of help me understand how these work, and hopefully they're useful to you as well. So let's look at some of the components of that. Start off with the training data. So the thing about Chat GPT, GPT and the other resources from OpenAI is that we don't really know the training data. It's a black box. We can speculate, we can guess, what kind of content is going into it, but it's a vast array of things, just essentially the whole of the internet, but we don't know what's there or not. So basically this includes, what you might call positive objective information, facts and all of that, that are good resources. It probably includes a lot of full text of books, includes a lot of journal articles, especially open access ones. We don't know if they have access to what paywall data, but it also includes all the crazy stuff. So all of the misinformation that might be out there on the web, it's hard to know if any of that is filtered out as it goes into a large language model. So, but whatever it is, we don't know what it is. So it's input encoded into tokens and then, loaded into, the foundation model. And then, I don't know if you can see my cursor, a lot of things happen in the pre-learning process in creating a pre-trained language model. So it's turned into tokens, and then a lot of math and statistics happen through the algorithms of a self-training large language model that works to understand all of the different associations between all of the tokens and parameters that then live inside this large language model. Once that process is finished, once the deep learning has taken place through massive amounts of computation time, and one of the big issues with this model of generative AI are the enormous resources it takes to train these language models that very large data centers for long periods of time will work through all of these tokens in order to be able to generate the pre-learning, the pre-trained language model. So there's a lot of interest in the environmental impact that it takes and kind of especially the pre-learning process, but also in the overall use of the large language model. Once it's loaded, then you can do some fine tuning in order to improve the performance of the large language model. You can tune the way that prompts are processed and how using prompts to be able to make tunings within the statistical associations among the tokens to be able to start generating results. So then that when you enter a prompt into the system, that prompt is generated into tokens, and then additional computation takes place in order to be able to start generating text, which is then decoded and output into the text or the images and all that we see. So that's a pretty crude way of kind of explaining these large language models, but it kind of helps me think about it and how it might fit within the library systems world. And we all know how impressive these capabilities are, that they're able to generate text, summarize text, translate from one language to another, kind of extract, concepts and turn, figure out what segments are within a piece of text. And they're increasingly multimodal, able to generate images, video, music, and all of that. I asked ChatGPT-4, well, what are the kinds of things you can use? And it gives you a nice list that you see next to this. Again, it's impressive what they can do and the types of content that they can generate, but all of the famous issues that are also seen with the use of these large language models. The last lightning talks talked about a lot of the ways that cultural content can be appropriated and misrepresented in large language models. Political bias, gender bias, all of those is part of that information that's been ingested and trained into the large language models, and those come out. And factual errors come out. Both, maybe in the way that the algorithms generate text, but also in the way that there's contradictory information within the training data. So, consent is a big issue. Of all of this black box of content is, did everyone agree that their content could be used in that way? And then when a language model generates an output, will it cite what it, the source that it came from? In most cases, not. That's just not part of the algorithms that come into play when this content is generated. And then, of course, all the ethical uses. What are the policies? What's considered plagiarism? What's ethical? What's not ethical? So those kind of non-technical, softer issues surrounding AI are just incredibly important and have a societal impact. Um, so we've already seen a lot of misuse of ChatGPT, among others. Um, you can't, you've got to be careful how you use it, and it doesn't replace kind of thoughtful human interactions and expressions in sensitive areas. So you can see some examples on the slide here of where an institution later on kind of regretted the way that it was used. I think that generative AI has a big impact on kind of the overall framework of search. This kind of looks at Google search as an example, but it can be applied in lots of different ways. So we kind of understand how Google works, that what Google does is it sends its Googlebot out, and then it harvests information from websites, kind of all websites, except for those that have said not to, and puts it into its discovery index. Then when somebody searches, then it uses its PageRank algorithm and other features to be able to generate our usual Google results. So hopefully, you're seeing return from your website being crawled. And I know that at least 50%, and some days 80% of the traffic on my website are bots that are populating discovery indexes. So I see frequent, visits from the bots from Google, from Bing, from Baidu, and lots of others that I can't even figure out what they are. And so, it's enormous amount of overhead. The payback to that overhead is that these blue links show up in search results, and then people click and visit my page, and I get a reasonable level of use. So that arrangement has been long-standing, and the whole world of search engine optimization and all of that is based on this approach. Now, with the search generative experience that Google has recently rolled out, things start to change. That what Google isn't returning so much are blue links that lead folks back to the website, but summaries and answers so that they don't have to go back to the website. And so that really turns everything upside down. So websites that have invested a lot of energy and effort to kind of tuning their website to get blue links returned back out of search engines, it's a whole new experience now, a whole new ballgame. So, you need to, think about the implications of generative AI in that way. Kind of that's the problematic side, but also the benefits that folks are going to get used to this kind of experience. They're not looking for a link to a site. They want an answer to their question. So that's generally a good thing. But then what is then the relationship between the provider of the service that's answering their questions and then what they're asking each website to do in order to be able to do that? So in a way, it's becoming more of a parasitic relationship instead of a symbiotic relationship. So that's important to think about. Again, I think I've said that. So in the library world, we have some hard questions to face that I know all of you have thought about. So, a lot of the way that the current consumer level large language models are pretty inconsistent with the way that libraries want to deliver their content and services. So what's the future to be able to address that in ways that libraries can take advantage of AI technologies, but still do it in ways that are consistent with our values, with our expectations of objective service, and so forth. At the institutional level, boy, that's really complicated now, isn't it? That students are using generative AI to do parts of essays, all of essays, and so forth. Is that okay, or is it not? How do you cite that kind of information? How do you acknowledge it? Is it considered plagiarism or not? and so forth. I think it's it already is difficult. It's going to be impossible to use tools to be able to automatically detect generated AI content. It's way easier to identify plagiarism in the sense that they're exact, quotations of text that are being borrowed from antecedent sources without attribution. So the usual mindset of the way that plagiarism detection just doesn't work, because generative AI is generating new text that probably doesn't exist before from its style, from other artifacts. Can you detect it? It's going to be ever harder, I think. So what I would hope, and I don't know that this quite exists yet, I think there are lots of opportunities for that, is, again, you can see the same crude large language model that I showed earlier, but what's different is the training data. So is it possible, kind of still at a very large and global scale, to take all the scholarly information, vetted content, good objective sources, encode those and put them into the large language model so that it won't have the same opportunities for misinformation and bias as it is when you have this black box of content used for training data. So, optimistically, you think that this approach might address it. But again, I don't believe in magic. There will continue to be artifacts of these language models that libraries will have to deal with, even if they're based on more current information. One of the things I meant to say earlier is that once a large language model is trained, in some cases it's kind of done. We're familiar with kind of the famous ending of sometime in 2021 of the content that's in ChatGPT-3, ChatGPT-4. Its world ends sometime in late 22, I think. And you would think, and this is kind of frustrated me, is that as you interact with the large language module, you correct it. You say, well, it apologizes because it gave you a wrong answer. And then you say, okay, show me that with this assumption. And then it's okay. It's a better result. But then in a new session, that all goes away because it's not been incorporated into the core of the large language model. Okay. So after, think then about how academic discovery services could be reshaped in order to take advantage of this. So in the same way that, Google AI enhanced search does a better job at providing answers to the questions that you enter into the Google search, is there the possibility to do that for academic discovery services? And would that be a good thing? I think it's mostly a good thing. It has some advantages. But it's able to take this existing discovery index, which are large. I think most of like EBSCO Discovery Service and the Ex Libris Central Discovery Index are indexing about 4 billion things. So they're large already, and then to be able to take that content and also use the algorithmic approach of the large language model to kind of do another layer of service on top of the list of results, then you can start imagining that you could get some pretty nice services that are coming out of library interfaces. Maybe are they still discovery services that might be useful to help students and researchers and as they look for information provided to them by the library. So is it a good thing to get an answer from this type of discovery service instead of a citation? Hopefully you're doing both. But I think that, it could save researchers a lot of time if kind of on the first cut of things, they're able to get a lot of kind of summaries of articles back, kind of get trending content and so forth. And then as they go further into the research, to start kind of going into the individual items that were returned in a search result to do kind of additional research. So, our an AI-powered library discovery service might start looking a little bit different and a lot more satisfying to library users. You can search in one language, get results back in other languages. That's a good thing. Most of the existing search engines can't do that. And then to kind of give new tools and to be able to explore topics and kind of new kinds of interfaces. I think that it's yet to be determined kind of how AI can enhance library provided interfaces, but I think that's the challenge ahead. Is there an educational role in what libraries do? We all are familiar with prompt engineering. How can you create prompt questions that will give you the best results, that will turn into the best set of tokens that will kind of match in better ways and give you good results back? And so the way that I approach is that I search for things that I hope I already know about so I can evaluate the results. So I told it to, build a presentation. And, I think it did a better job than I did as far as the kinds of things that should be talked about in this kind of talk. So, I continue to be needed in the broader world of libraries, if generative AI can kind of take all this information that I've kind of personally learned and disseminate and just be able to do it amongst, thousands of other topics. So, it really is true that, we all need to think and rethink about what our lives, what our value added is going to be as AI can do more and more of it. One topic I've thought about is AI versus linked data. I've been following the linked data for libraries approach for a long time as well. And, linked data, came into the library scene to make library metadata and structures more consistent with the way the web works. And we've been working at it for a couple of decades to make a transition from MARC to various types of linked data formats, kind of culminating in BibFrame and RDA and so forth. Does that effort become somewhat redundant or unneeded if AI can do the same kinds of things without having to reinvent the way that libraries do cataloging and metadata? And so, that's one of the things that I've been thinking about. I don't have a good answer to that, but I think that, it's important to think about that. Of course, I asked GPT for, a few tips along the way. So the impact of AI on patron-facing services, is pretty obvious. I think, there are things that we can do to enhance search and discovery and so forth, but it has an impact on the back end of libraries as well. And technical services how does it apply to creating metadata? Can it create metadata at scale, better than human library workers? Can it enhance the productivity of skilled library workers as they approach to catalog library resources? So again, I think library-specific large language models can do that in a way that the general ones don't. I played around. I'm not a cataloger, but I think I understand enough about MARC and standards to be able to evaluate it. And so I've worked with ChatGPT 3 and 4 to be able to see how it can generate MARC records, and they're pretty abysmal failures at this point. There was an article published that talked about that in more detail. But that again, I think that some thoughts about that article were that the quality of the records weren't criticized as well. So let's think about GitHub and GitHub Copilot. It has revolutionized the way that programmers work. That it used to be that Stack Overflow was the main resource that programmers would work with. They would be able to kind of find previous solutions to problems that they're trying to figure out. And Copilot has changed that world. What I have read, what I've heard from others, is that using Copilot, they're able to be like 80% more efficient to generate the code they need in 20% of the time that it would have taken. And it's not like, well, maybe there's small applications that could just generate the whole application, but when you're thinking at it more in components, that you're working on an enterprise application, you've got to solve this little bit, you can get Copilot to write that little bit, then you can evaluate it, you can fix it, you can test it, and then start integrating it into the overall application, and that's a huge time saver. And then take code and add the comments that need to be in it for self-documentation standards and all of that. So, you can see that it's made a big impact on the world of computer programming. So are there opportunities to take this Copilot model into libraries so that, according to each specialization, you can have a Copilot that works you through the task at hand in a much more efficient way, which I think is a good way of blending kind of what human experts, human professionals have in libraries, and still take advantage of AI technologies to increase the productivity. I think that, my understanding is that there are fewer folks working in technical services in libraries than ever before, but that doesn't mean that the volume of work is met. That, how many things continue to go undescribed because they're in one kind of backlog or another. And then especially when you think when it comes to describing large digital collections, how do you do that at scale? Can we start using generative AI to be able to look at an image, extract concepts, draft out a Dublin core or some type of metadata record that can then be quickly put into a digital asset management system or whatever. But again, the concept of Copilot, I think, is applicable to libraries. So of course, libraries have an educational role. Those of you who work in libraries, I know, have already wrestled with these issues. So prohibiting the use of AI, I think, is kind of a non-starter. I think that it's trying to find ways that kind of maximize ethical use. Is it wrong for a student to use generative AI to kind of sketch out ideas for a paper? Maybe. Is it ethical to be able to have it write the paper? Well, probably not so much. So it's these compromises that we're going to have to make between traditional ways of doing education and learning and what's possible now. I think that every major organization is kind of rethinking what its policies are going to be relative to AI. Universities, national library organizations, businesses, all wrestling with the same kinds of things so that it doesn't get, we don't get lost by it. AI is going to happen in the world. So how can libraries make a positive impact to ensure that it happens in good ways? AI can be a incredible tool for society and being able to generate content and save time and all of that. It can also be a bad thing at scale. Misinformation at scale is possible through generative AI. So we all know how misinformation can have an impact on society, and using kind of traditional media approaches, it's already, had an impact. What's it going to be like when, because of AI, that can happen at a scale much faster and broader than we've seen before? I think similar topic, how are library workers going to incorporate it? If you spend time kind of doing meeting minute summaries and a lot of administrative tasks, it seems really beneficial to make good use of your time by having AI do some of that work. It's not mission critical. Use it where it can save you time so that you can focus on activities that make more of a difference to your library. So here's a list of things that just came to mind that libraries can use. Some of them we already talked about, but there's a lot of work that I think that libraries can use AI to help them do better. What are the vendors doing? I just want to run through a list of what I've noticed that some of the library vendors are doing. so keep an eye on that, and then be able to think about what libraries themselves might be able to do, beyond, in addition to what the vendor is going to do at the scale that works. Clarivate, is very data and analytics driven. It's not surprising that they've already made a lot of investments in AI tools to advance their products. The one that caught my attention most is their partnership with ai4Labs. It seems like that's a good partnership that will help them extend a lot of the systems that academic libraries use. EBSCO's issued a statement that they're working on this. They didn't give specific product examples and what AI technologies they're using, but again, important to note that lots of library vendors that we deal with every day are wrestling with the same kind of issues. The OCLC WorldCat beta of AI enhanced search. Interesting, not a lot yet. Be interesting to see what becomes of that. And then the scholarly publishers, one after another, are incorporating AI into their world. This is the interesting thing to me that, I don't know if you've come across it, was been around in the library world for 2015 as kind of the first AI generated discovery interface. Well, they went out of business kind of at the height of AI. So I've been trying to find out the details about that, but did they jump in too soon? Did they get outpaced by the other types of AI technologies? Hard to know, but it's just an interesting observation that kind of the initial vendor that jumped into that field for libraries, it didn't work out so well for them. So just looking ahead, it's inevitable that this is going to be part of the library world. How are we going to face that challenge? I feel like now we're followers, need to be leaders in that. That's a pretty ambitious challenge, I think. How do we help our library users and society in general, especially for public libraries, to kind of do AI literacy in the same way that we do bibliographic literacy, bibliographic instruction. The use of AI tools is not irrelevant, and libraries face being irrelevant if they don't find ways to embrace these technologies that are just expanding rapidly, more rapidly than we'd ever managed. How do we get to the next level of library automation? I feel like library automation systems may be a bit stagnant. They all get more and more kind of new features year by year, but the approach doesn't change that much. And the efficiencies that they offer haven't gained that much. Sure, it's automated tools, better than doing it manually. How do you go to the next level in helping library workers be more effective and proactive in their work in ways that we haven't seen so far? So in the end, libraries need to be part of the positive use of AI for society. Again, if we don't, then not only are the implications bad for libraries themselves, but of course for society. So that's kind of the end of my ramblings on the topic. I hope that they've been interesting for you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. So first, let me see if I can see the questions. I don't yet. Okay. So. Okay, I'm looking at one question that was asked in a recent, is this for me? Probably. In a recent blog post made it clear that customers using products integrated with generative AI capabilities will receive legal protection. Any thoughts other than, yeah, right? What legal protection can they offer? Will they cover, legal liabilities in the case of misuse of their technologies? It would be kind of surprising if any big tech organization, any tech organization was able to do that. I would really have to know what they meant when they say they're going to offer legal protection. And maybe the link gives more details than I'm seeing in your question.
There's one question from Gary Atwood. Are there any parallels between the release of ChatGPT and the birth of the World Wide Web in terms of the impact on libraries?
So I would say the impact of the World Wide Web, it happened gradually. That it didn't. It took a while for libraries to kind of become part of that. The transition to e-journals took a while. The transition even to web-based catalogs, the first one, those came out beginning in the mid to late 1990s. So I would say libraries were slow and cautious. In retrospect, it seemed like it was overwhelming at the time compared to what's happening now with AI. Uh, I forget the statistics, but you know, the, the observation is that the release of ChatGPT 3 was saw the fastest adaptation of any application in kind of the history of technology. So, this is different. So I think that libraries will be slow to embrace it, kind of at their peril, as I said. So yeah, it feels different to me.
Thank you. And Tim Spalding has a question. He's saying my question feeds off my memory and your memory of previous waves of reactive technological change in libraries, Web 2.0, the semantic web, social media in libraries, and so on. My question is, will libraries have any control over this? Can they make an impact, or will they just be carried along? Assuming that they don't have a lot of control and their impact will be modest, what can and should they hold the line on?
So I agree with Tim. Tim makes great observations. Uh, you know, Tim and I have been in the library systems world for a long time and have kind of observed, this sluggish nature of libraries to adapting, up and coming technologies. We're conservative organizations at heart, and we don't want to invest in technologies until they're well proven. Um, so yeah, I think that the tech world, the consumer world, the business world will create and advance technologies in ways that libraries will adapt over time, I think, but don't have the resources to kind of develop as quickly. When you think that the massive data centers and computational resources that are required to train large language models, that may be beyond individual libraries, might be at the level of library technology vendors. But yeah, so I think that we will be challenged to lead. We'll probably follow to a larger extent. But what do we hold the line on? Some of those lines can't be held. Uh, they the common shortcomings of generative AI are going to be out there in the world. And I think what we hold the line on are the way that those shortcomings find their way into anything the library puts out as its service. We can't control the problems of ChatGPT 4 and all of that, but if we put our brand on it, we got to hold the line that it follows the values and understandings that libraries have with their communities.
And the next question is from Hannah Mutrin. How do you think librarian training programs should adjust to this wave of AI?
So by adapting it, right? That needs to be part of the curriculum that any training program for a future library worker, or that a training program that libraries offer to their patrons, demographic instruction, they've got to address this. So again, a kind of slow and sluggish approach isn't going to be helpful. This is here at hand, and we can't wait 3 or 4 years to start educating library workers and library patrons about its impact.
And it's almost like the technical services people, right? When we go to school, we don't have access to any of the proprietary systems.
Mhm.
So when we come into the workforce, we are always behind a couple of years.
Right. And it's easy to hold on to traditional concepts and approaches that, the way that you form citations and kind of a lot of the kind of traditional content of library outreach and bibliographic instruction, may pale in comparison to the need to help library users, uh, better approach these new tools. So, you got to give up something and in order to be able to have the bandwidth to start addressing this important new topic.
The next question is from Althea Mir. Do you think libraries are worried about using AI tools because it's already hard to justify funding for staff? How can librarians use AI to make their work more efficient, but still prove their value to the organization?
Well, it's a good question, an understandable question. But, would you rather be able to report to your administration that you're spending, 3 hours a week, 5 hours a week doing meeting minutes, or that you're able to automate that so you can focus on developing new services for your patrons? So every new technology has meant readjusting, the way that libraries take advantage of the talent of their personnel. So this is like that. The library automation systems, uh, you know, automated a lot of things that were just, terribly time consuming to do. And then it let library folks kind of concentrate on providing better services. Um, there one example after another, I think you could find for every new technology that libraries have adopted, have not necessarily ended up in libraries having fewer staff in general. Other factors have done that, but in the way that they justify their budgets. I think there's plenty of room to continue to justify the way you spend your budgets. In fact, it might be well received to say that, yeah, we're automating things that we used to spend a lot of rote time on, and now we're offering improved services to the university, to the patrons, and so forth.
Thank you. The next question is from Ishan Mogadam. Do you think librarians have a chance to anchor prompt engineering within their profession? My thinking here is that our inherent skills with conducting reference interviews could be translatable or transferable to formulating effective prompts to query LLMs.
I think you've hit it exactly. That fits well within the skill set of libraries, and that's probably a lot more relevant than kind of the traditional approach of kind of teaching library users the right way to use different interfaces to different information products. So yeah, I think you've expressed it well.
Karen Harker asks your idea for cataloging Copilot, but you suggest that it's based on tools that are highly controlled and proprietary. What are the better arguments to convince the rights holders of these tools to collaborate and build this tool?
Well, so the classic thought is Cataloger's Desktop. That's a proprietary tool with proprietary content. So that's the conversation to have. I'm not the one to say that the owners of those tools and products ought to kind of work, move to a different business model. But it also becomes the case with generative AI. You can build new content and models around them. So I think that they ignore that concept at their peril, because, how hard would it be for an AI to generate kind of new documentation for all the different flavors of RDA? Especially given that RDA is, the documentation, the new RDA documentation, is so slow to come out and won't be finished till what, 2027, last I heard. So I think that AI would certainly help accelerate the process of generating, the documentation that catalogers and others use that has been taking a while to develop.
Next question is from Laura Ackerman. What kind of skills do we need to have or acquire in order to evaluate the quality of what we get using AI?
I would say it's mostly the skills that you have now. I mean, librarians, especially public service librarians and subject librarians, this is your wheelhouse. You know how to evaluate information, and ChatGPT is part of that. In the same way that, when I'm looking at these different tools, I try to have them, I address problems that have to do with things that I know about. So I'm able to evaluate that. So each subject specialist has the same opportunity. See how well they work, find their shortcomings, and then discover ways to use kind of prompt engineering in order to be able to make them provide better responses. And then that's what you work with your researchers that you provide services to kind of help them through those same problems and advise them of the shortcomings that they come in kind of in their native way.
Thank you. The next one is from Sandra Morden. Library systems have become so complex and we are all using a relatively small set of products. Are you seeing any pioneers coming up who may be more agile and might provide add-ons or entirely new systems that might leapfrog the existing and revitalize a competitive market for systems, specifically for libraries?
Well,
I
good.
I like the idea of your library co-pilot.
Yeah, so I think there will be tools and technologies that will be developed, and it's the startups and smaller companies that have a chance at doing that first. But when it comes to, should there be a new set of library services platforms and all of that, those I think are, I want to say, commodity business systems that, they all take different approaches to doing the same things, and there aren't, there's not a lot of differentiation. So the idea of saying, well, we need somebody to go in and develop a whole new one of those is reinventing some wheels and, focus on things that haven't been done yet. So I'm not optimistic that there's going to be kind of new players in kind of library services platform arena, maybe new players in the academic discovery service arena. That seems a little bit more possible, but the real opportunity are the integrated the tools that can be integrated into these larger systems. Rebuilding the library services platform requires enormous resources. I think libraries will get a lot more value out of doing kind of other specialized things.
Thank you. The next question is from Ellen Carey. I like the idea of library-specific LLM that would use scholarly material for training data.
Mhm.
At the same time, that could reinforce the traditional notions of expertise that have excluded marginalized groups from scholarly publishing, and that many of us are trying to challenge in our pedagogy. How might we create a LLM that is less prone to hallucinations and more able to cite its sources, while also considering expertise more broadly that's not being limited to scholarly publishing?
Again, that's a great observation that, I just posited some examples of what would go into a library-specific large language model. So I think that in collaboration with cultural experts, what other material could be incorporated in large language models that would help address some of that. Because I think that's an extension of content that has to be done carefully, because there could be negative content that comes into that sphere as well. So again, I think that having that type of content is of a benefit, and then it has to do with who's assembling this large language model. Is it a pure commercial venture? Is it a library community venture? Probably in collaboration with a commercial entity that has the resources to do it. So just important to be part of the conversation is probably the best advice I can think of.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. If you have
Okay.
any more questions, you can post it. I guess that's a wrap for our first AI conference. Thank you so much for giving us your time. We really so appreciate the presentation, your closing keynote. We learned a lot. Do you think you will be sharing the slides with us?
I'm happy to. So I'll send them
Okay,
to you.
thank you.
Mhm.
So I will send, and thank you all the attendees. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the conference and learned a lot, and you're leaving the conference with so many questions that we don't have yet answers to. I'll send it a short survey. Please try to complete it so we can make improvements next year. We are extremely grateful for Georgia Tech for providing us the Zoom link, and grateful for all my colleagues who helped me along the way to plan and execute this conference. And again, thank you speakers for their time. That's the most important thing. We couldn't have done it without you.
Glad to participate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Breeding. Thank you all. Bye-bye.